Okay guys, welcome to the next episode of Beers with Brownie. We're an International Rugby League YouTube channel and we just want to highlight all the people that have contributed to growing the game around the world just because they're passionate about sharing our great sport around the world. Okay guys, so if you could please spread the word about our channel. If we can get 1,000 subscribers, we're going to buy 100 footies and we're going to send them all around the world to developing international rugby league nations that could really use these footies to help them with their development. If we can get to 10,000 subscribers, we're going to even fund the Solomon Islands Rugby League domestic competition. And what that'll entail is balls, we'll do some kit for referees, and we'll try and get some assessors heading over there as well. So 10,000 subscribers guys, so please help us out, please spread the word. Thank you. I'd just like to welcome our guest for this episode. He's refed 356 NRL games, Mr. Gavin Badger. Welcome to the episode.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Badge, we've got one thing in common. We're both international level referees in that arena. I was lucky enough when I was living in London to referee a Malta versus Denmark international, which was a European qualifier. And I also had a mate who started Norwegian Rugby League over in Norway there, and I refereed at Scandinavian Nines, and yeah, it was a fantastic experience. So you've refereed a number of internationals. So it was Fiji versus Tonga in 2006, refereed 2 NRL AllStars games. So I consider them internationals because now it's Indigenous versus Maori. And you've also, on your second wedding anniversary, you refereed with your wife, jointly refereeing the Philippines versus Thailand game. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that a friend of mine, Andrew Charles, who does a fair bit of stuff with Emerging Nations Rugby League. He was looking at the Thailand side and helping out with the Thailand side at the time, and Casey and I were about to go on a holiday, and we generally go to the States. We generally try and go to America for our holidays, but yeah, Charles, he sort of contacted us and said, we've got this game on, would you give us a hand and help us out? So we decided we're going to holiday in Thailand that year and refereed the first international rugby league game in Asia. So yeah, it was quite good to be able to do that with my wife.
Gee, that's fantastic. Not many couples can say they've done that. And what was the standard like?
Well, I think the score was 90-something nil because the Philippines side had a couple of NRL players in there, so right. They had fringe and a lot of lower grade players in
Kevin Gordon,
both Gordon and the Shrama boys, so Matty and Luke Shrama. So they had a fair bit of experienced talent where the Thailand boys were virtually made up of park footballers. So yeah, it was a fairly high score. I think it was around the 70s or 80s, but. Score didn't really matter. I think it was more about the experience for everyone.
I was going to say, still be a lot of fun and a great experience for all involved. So I don't know whether Casey, your wife, has told you, but we actually met in 2007 at the South Pacific Games in Apia, Samoa. So it was the first time that Rugby League was included in the games, in the 9-a-side format. And I was your wife's touch judge in a few games, and if my memory serves me correctly, she ended up getting the final, and she did a fantastic job of that. So you must be really proud of her, what she's achieved, especially breaking down those barriers, being a female and refereeing a men's sport.
Yeah, and there's not too many sports where females and males compete with each other. I look at it, you try and break it down and go, well, horse racing is probably one where the female and male jockeys compete on the same level, but in our sport, males and females compete together, and the game doesn't change or slow down or do anything different because there's a female refereeing. So the achievements of Casey, they're amplified because of that. She's got to work twice as hard as I do to have the same fitness levels just because of genetic makeup. So the amount of effort and hard work that she's put in over a long period of time, it's phenomenal, and I'm in awe of her ability to do that. Like, I don't know if I could have done it as hard as she's had to do it, because not only physical side of it, it's also that perception side of female shouldn't be out there, and she's had to deal with a lot of that over the years, and just being a female in a male dominated arena.
She's doing a fantastic job, and just for the viewers out there, I must correct myself. I said in a men's game, women's rugby league is massively on the rise at the moment, so I just want to correct myself there. Rugby league is an inclusive game, but Casey's just doing so well in the men's arena, isn't she?
Yeah.
So Badge, each episode on Beers with Brownie, we'd like to support beers that support rugby league. So this episode, we've got a Tui's New.
Beautiful.
So Tui's New are sponsors of the New South Wales Blues. So cheers, Badge. Okay, so just before we get into the questions, every episode I like to show my support for the international game, so I've got my Taua Samoa shirt on for this episode, and I believe that Samoa, along with Fiji, will be the next two nations to rise up into Tier 1 as per Tonga did. They've got some exciting young up-and-coming players, and there's more and more of them in the NRL all the time. And I've also got my NRL Nines hat on, just show my support for the Nines concept. I think it's fantastic. It's a great way to showcase our game to emerging markets such as Perth, and maybe move it to Adelaide, etc. Are you a fan of the Nines badge?
Yeah, I am, and I agree with you. I think that the shortened version of the game is more exciting for new fans to the game, fans that don't understand the game as well, because it's quick, fast pace, and I think it's a lot easier to take to other places. You talk about taking it to other places around Australia. Internationally, I think the North American market is perfect for Nines Rugby League, and I think that the collisions and the speed and the skill and athleticism of Rugby League players would really stand out to that North American market.
I've watched Rugby Union Sevens explode around the world, and I just think Rugby League could do the same with Nines. It's such a fast, exciting concept, and it's also has all the skills of a Rugby League game. So I think we've got to get it going.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Badge, so first question. So tell us, how did you fall in love with Rugby League?
I fell in love with Rugby League as a 3-year-old, actually. I started playing Rugby League with the mighty Zetland Magpies in the South Sydney Junior Rugby League.
Nice.
So I played there for up until I was about 14 or 15, and during that time, I think out of the 13 or 12 years that I played there, we won 9 grand finals. I think 7 of them were undefeated.
Wow.
I was lucky enough to play with some really talented footballers who a few of them went on to play at the NRL level, and some for Australia.
Wow.
And we got to that level where it was getting a bit boring for us because we were winning so often. So we sort of split. So half of the guys went and joined another club. So we went to Alexandria Rovers.
Wow. Yeah.
So I played a few years there at the Mighty Rovers, and then we had a really good competition with Zetland and Mascot throughout that, and won 2 comps at the Rovers as well. So pretty successful junior rugby league career, but got found out real quick when all my mates got graded and I got left behind that the talent was with them and not me, and they made me look good. And then so I started refereeing when I was about 18. So that was my love affair with rugby league, initially as a 3-year-old as a player, and I'm still a rugby league tragic and love rugby league to death.
Do you mind if I ask which team you supported as a youngster?
Yeah, it's a funny story too. Being a local Redfern boy in the South Junior, everyone assumes it would be the Rabbits. I've always had a really soft spot for the Bunnies. Half of my family, so all the females in my family are all Bunny supporters, but all the guys and in my family are Balmain. We were Balmain Tiger supporters growing up, so I spent a lot of my youth on the hill at Leichhardt Oval.
Oh, nice one. And which position did you play?
I played a little bit at fullback and a little bit in the halves, but spent a fair bit of time on the bench as well.
No, I hear you, don't worry, Badge. So you refereed 356 NRL games, which is a massive achievement. Do any stick out in your mind?
There's a couple here now. The debut is obviously the one that stands out the most, and you work so hard for such a long time. I call it refereeing rugby league the longest apprenticeship in the world, because it takes so long from when you start to when you actually get to the pinnacle, and if you're fortunate enough to do it, so it's a 15 years process. And so to get that debut and actually go out and referee in the best rugby league competition in the world, which then as an official puts you in some of the best officials in world sport as a rugby league NRL referee.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty proud moment, and something that I'll never forget. And there's a lot happened in that game as well, so it stands out a lot. There's plenty of other games over the career, but the debut's the one.
So the heart must have been pounding, running out there for the first time on the NRL arena.
Oh yeah, and no matter how many times you've done it, like when I was about to go out onto the field, standing in the tunnel, and it was at Suncorp Stadium in front of a pretty big crowd.
Yeah. And
all I could think about was, don't stuff this up, because I'm going to be on national TV and all my mates are watching, and I'll never hear the end of it if I do something silly out there. Yeah. So as much as you try not to doubt yourself, you never know if you can handle that level and the scrutiny. Until you get out there and actually have a crack, and fortunately for me, people who make those decisions believed that I was good enough to do it more than once.
So what was the biggest crowd that you refed in front of?
There's probably been some pretty big ones. Suncorp. I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of semi-finals up there, the Broncos and the Cowboys, a couple of times, a couple of years running, and it's full house at Suncorp. So wherever they are, 56 or whatever is probably, you know, some of the biggest ones I've had, and you know, 56,000 people at Suncorp Stadium is quite an atmosphere.
So Badge, you were the 5th referee in history to referee 300 NRL games besides, after Bill Harrigan. That was my ex-boss at Oztag. So Bill, if you're watching today, Cole Pearce, Shane Hayne and Steve Clark. So that's fantastic. What a great achievement. You must be really proud of that.
Oh yeah, to be mentioned in the same vein as those guys, just for a start is quite honourable. But for me, I haven't done grand finals. I haven't refereed Origins. So for someone to referee that long and not do that, it says to me, I actually wear that as a bit of a badge of honour. It says that obviously that what I did, not only on field, off field, meant something to people to keep me around for that long. Because I wasn't the top referee ever in my career. I wasn't that person who was getting the big games. So to have such a long career and not do that, to me says that my on-field skills sort of wasn't the reason why I got to be there so long. It was more my personality and my character. So I wear that as a bit of a badge of honour.
Definitely. So I've just read that you've recently been recruited to the West Tigers. Can you explain what your role is with the club?
Oh yeah, I've got a really small role there with the Tigers actually. So I just go and help out when they do their club scrimmages. So I'll go out and referee those for them and help them out, and a little bit of education with the players around why they get penalised and how we can be better at not being penalised, and the way the game's going now with the six more rule and how fast the game's going. It's really hard to defend multiple sets of tackles now. The attacks are so good, so if we can limit the amount of times that we give away extra sets to oppositions, it'll only improve the club as a whole. And so that's just the small role I have. It's just a small part-time role to help out. And for me, it's a bit of a personal development role as well, because I'm getting to work with Michael Maguire, and Madge's won a comp is when people talk about the innovative and the great coaches in the competition at the moment, his name get mentioned. So for me to work with him and learn from him can only help me in my personal development as well.
A lot of us forget he's a New Zealand head coach, and New Zealand are the #1 ranked team in the world. So fantastic person to learn under as well.
Exactly right.
So Badge, I follow you on social media, and I notice you're a big fan of International Rugby League. So what made you follow International Rugby League?
I think just being a rugby league fan in general, I just love the game, and I would love to see it more successful worldwide. I'm a big fan of all sports, I love sports, but I don't know a sport that's better than ours, and I might be biased because but I just watch other games and I just think this game is just made for TV, and it's made for large audiences. It's made to be played in front of big crowds, and obviously we're limited with population in this country, and there's other countries that have massive populations, and I think that's where we should be looking at. So to make the game grow, if the game is bigger around the world, you get more resources, you get more money into the game, so you can then expand it more, you can have more people involved, and more people who love the game can make a living out of the game as well. So the more people that can do that, the better the game gets. You can get better people in. Like COVID hit and we lost a lot of really good rugby league people because financially it wasn't possible. So if we're getting the money in, we can employ those people full time. A lot of people that do stuff for near nothing because they love the game, we could then employ them. Could you imagine how good the game could be if the people who were doing it for nothing were actually getting paid, had more time to do that, especially at the grassroots and at the international level. And I was fortunate a couple of times to referee at the Cabramatta Nines, which is an international tournament, and seeing the likes of some of those like the Latin Heat and those teams come about and then start to break off in Brazil and stuff like that, making their own teams out of that, and you've got some of the Africa United sides play and stuff like that, and Harmony Cups, and just seeing the excitement that kids get the opportunity to wear the national jersey in rugby league. For some people that might not mean much. For a kid who plays for Malta, his family is so proud that their grandson or their son is wearing a Maltese jersey in a sport in this country that they all love. 10, 15 years ago, that would never have been an option. You know what I mean? So, so I just wear my small little piece in the game where I can with officiating and stuff like that. If I can help out in a small way and improve the game internationally and grow the game internationally, I'm more than willing to put my hand up whenever I can.
As you make some really good points there, so I just want to share two little stories that's happened to me personally. So I was lucky to play one test match for Fiji, and I just remember when the anthem was on, I was standing next to our prop, Billy Bale Loma Loma, who was playing at the Roosters at the time, and sorry Billy if I'm embarrassing you, but the tears rolling down his face when the anthem was on. I've never felt that feeling before, that passion. And it was one of the things, out of all the years I've refereed, played rugby league, that was one moment that I'll never forget. It was just so much raw emotion, and like you say, the chance for players to put on that national jersey, there's nothing better, to represent your country or your country of heritage or where your parents are from, etc. But Badger, I just wanted to say, when you touched on that point about rugby league being big around the world, so I lived in London for 10 years, and it was a bit of a hard sell trying to get Londoners who had never, they're more into soccer, trying to get them into rugby league. And I'd say, oh, Friday night we've got a Wigan versus St Helens derby on, would you like to come and watch? And they're like, oh, I don't know, it's two little northern towns that I've never have no association with. But when the 2013 World Cup was on, I said to a few mates, and never seen rugby league before, would you like to see England versus New Zealand? And bang, they said, yeah, England are playing, yeah, we've got some buying. So they instantly said, yeah, we'll go and watch it because they've got someone to really cheer on. I don't know whether you remember the game, but that was when Sean Johnson did that little sidestep, broke all the English fans' hearts right in the last 30 seconds of the game. But I was in a pub. Sorry, I correct myself. I was actually at Wembley, and just people that had never seen rugby league before were just going, wow, how good was this spectacle? It was Stan Burgess and Sonny Bill were hammering each other all game, and they just loved it. But I'm a big believer that if we can grow the game around the world, it's only going to benefit everyone, like especially the NRL, just similar to how basketball has grown around the world and the NBA are the leading competition and they've benefited from that. So I've noticed via social media that you've helped out some international rugby league identities around the world, such as our good friend Monty Gaddis at Cleveland Rugby League. I believe you've helped out like the Brooklyn Kings, New York Knights, California Rugby League. So tell us about how that all came about.
And social, that's all through social media generally. The New York Knights thing, I remember, I think it might have been, speaking about doing stuff with the wife, it might have been our honeymoon, I think in 2010, where we were going to New York, Casey and I. And because of baggage limits, we get to take 2 bags each overseas, and I was thinking, well, we don't need 2 bags each, is something we can do. So I looked around and Googled around. I knew rugby league had been played in the States, and I knew it was sort of just developing at the stage. And a friend of mine actually went over there the year before and refereed the grand final, the US ARL grand final. Yeah. So I knew that rugby league was played over there, so I sort of Googled around and found the New York Knights, and I knew we were going to be there. So I got in contact and said, look, we're going to be over there. Is there anything we can do? And they just sort of said, oh, well, just to catch up would be nice and have a chat, and if you could bring some gear, that'd be awesome. So we filled up 2 extra bags of gear and balls and some refs gear and some other stuff that we had lying around. My wife was working for ARL development at the time, so she had a fair bit of stuff that we could give away as well. So we took some kids' footies over, we took some full-size footies and dumped all that on them. And at the time we were the largest benefactor of US Rugby League because of the amount of gear that we'd taken over. And we got to sit down with their coach. I actually lost his name at the minute, but he was a French guy who was the coach of the Knights at the time, and right. I spoke some stuff with him around how the game's played and what he could do for his side. And so it came from there. And just seeing his passion for the game as well and for rugby league in the States, sort of got me my blood pumping a bit for it. The Monty thing, I followed Monty a bit on social media for a while. And when I was talking before about people being paid in rugby, the NRL or Super League should be throwing cash at Monty. His enthusiasm for the game and to get the game going in the States and put together Cleveland Rugby League and doing amazing things over there. They're the people that we should be looking after. And I'd seen you be looking for gear and all that, and I had a fair bit of gear lying around, so I filled a bag and sent it across to him. And when you see the appreciation and the stuff that I get back from him, more than happy to help those people out. So. And I've been contacted here and there especially from the States, because a lot of people who follow me on social media see that I go over there every year. So if we're in an area, we'll try and catch up. The latest one, the California Rugby League guys have reached out, and at the back end of last year, we'd planned to go across and do some stuff. COVID sort of killed that off for us. So we'll get across there as soon as we can, and we'll help them out. And the guys down in the Carolinas, they've reached out. The Delaware Foxes have reached out. So. we look at it planning a holiday around rugby league towns in the States and helping out where we can, because everyone benefits. We get to meet some really good people that we can interact with overseas, and they get the benefit of having us and helping them out. So yeah, really looking forward to getting out there and doing it.
Oh, great stuff, Badge. And Monty, I know you're watching, so a big shout out to you, Monty. You're doing a fantastic job at Cleveland. I was actually lucky enough to work for the USA Hawks at the 2017 World Cup, so all of the clubs you mentioned, I had a guy called Martwain Johnson who was at Delaware Foxes, and yeah, they're all just hard-working volunteers. And like you say, if we had more money in the game, it'd be great if we could pay some of these guys to be full-time and really drive the game over in the States, because there's just so much potential over there. So Badge, 2021 was going to be a huge year for Rugby League, with the Rugby League World Cup set to take place over in the Northern Hemisphere. What do you think will happen this year with the COVID-19 situation over there?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, like I said, I love rugby league and I love international rugby league, but we've got to look after our players. Our players are our greatest asset. You can have, all the best business models in the world, but the players are the asset. And if it was me, I would be nowhere near trying to put our players at risk. The pandemic in the UK at the moment is nowhere near as safe as we are here. They're still really in the throes of some heavy stuff. So, as it stands now, I wouldn't even be considering sending any of our athletes across there. Unfortunate, because it was going to be, a big defining moment for rugby league in the UK. I think the crowds and stuff, the expectation is going to be a really successful tournament and really reignite rugby league in the UK, especially around Scotland and Ireland, who have been reasonably successful in World Cups, and overachieved with some of their results. So I was really looking forward to that, and looking forward to those Pacific nations really stamping some authority on those spots just below the Australian and New Zealand and Great Britain sides. But I'd be loath to be sending guys over there. Now, I can't see why we can't look at a tournament of sorts, either here or in New Zealand or in the South Pacific. I'd love to. Let's take a tournament to the South Pacific. They're pretty well covered for COVID. They've done really well in those South Pacific nations. So, and they are the backbone of rugby league really at the moment. Let's give them something. Let's take the games there.
So I'm hearing they're going to make a call on the World Cup in March. So if you were a betting man, you'd say it's off?
Yeah. I just the logistics of trying to get all these players in there and then getting them home. I think it's just too hard. You'd be looking at minimum. You've got the 4 weeks of isolation either side. So already the players have got to be away from their families for 4 weeks after what they had to go through last year. What the players went through last year to get rugby league going, they should, for the history of the game, should be ever indebted to that group of players from 2020, because if it wasn't for the players, like I said, Peter Vlandis was outstanding getting the game up, but the players have got to go out there and do it and be away from their families and not live their life, miss a lot of their kids' stuff and schooling and sports and stuff like that. So we're indebted to them, so we should be looking after them, not trying to put them under more pressure next season, or at the end of this season.
So you touched on it about a Pacific tournament. That's leading to my next question. What's the best result for International Rugby League for 2021 if the World Cup is cancelled? Do you think we should have an Oceania Cup?
We should have as much international football at the end of this year as we can. I know that sort of goes against what I just spoke about, looking after the players, because they played till late last year, and especially the guys that played in the Origin series. It was a long season with no buys through it out, so they went 20 rounds non-stop and then into an Origin series. But like I said, for the game to flourish, we need to get it back out there and show everyone how good our product is. So at the back end of this season, if there is no World Cup, we should be looking at as many international fixtures, the Pacific nations. We could have a European style tournament as well, where they without them having to cross too many borders, and why not have a North American tournament as well?
Well, one thing I put on social media last year, Badge, was Australia, all the players are obviously NRL players in Australia, and which is similar to Tonga now, where all their players play in the NRL. There might be the 1 or 2 exceptions that play in Super League, but they could put together a really good side of all Australian-based players that are in the NRL. So if COVID does stop a lot of internationals, I'd love to see Tonga's momentum continue and maybe have a 3-game series against Australia where none of these players will have to quarantine. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And look, the emergence of Tonga as a dominant rugby league country gives a lot of emphasis and a lot of momentum to the Samoas, the Fiji, Papua New Guinea, who have been dominant at certain, a force in rugby league in certain times, that have sort of fallen back, and hopefully with the Hunters being successful, that starts to build again. But yeah, the momentum that Tonga have created allows those other nations to say, why not us? Why not us? Like if you'd have said 5 years ago that Tonga were going to be competitive and beat Australia, beat New Zealand, be able, be a force in international rugby league, people would have laughed at you.
Absolutely.
But you look at it now, and they're probably the most exciting international team to watch play rugby league, and I reckon they are the draw card now for international rugby league. People will go and watch Tonga. You just see how many red jerseys are at Tongan games and flags around the streets, and that when they were successful in the last World Cup. So I'm really excited about South Pacific Rugby League.
I think the New Zealand Rugby League, when State of Origin's on, they should look to play Tonga in that rep period, because like you say, they'll sell out those crowds. The sea of red. We saw it at the 2017 World Cup. So the International Rugby League have got to keep that momentum going, in my opinion. So Badge, my next question. You're a proud Indigenous man. And you're a bit of a trailblazer. You're the first Indigenous full-time NRL referee. Will we see more Indigenous referees come through the ranks, do you think?
Yeah, I've got no doubt. It may take a little while, but there is a lot of talented young Indigenous officials running around out in the districts. So part of my role with New South Wales Rugby League is around Indigenous engagement, and hopefully through some programs that I'm going to run, that we can bring those guys in, upskill them, give them a little bit of a taste of what it is to be a professional rugby league referee, and then hopefully off the back of that breeds a bit of fire in their belly to get really push and really strive to get there. And there are some young Indigenous officials out there that are in the mix of people that we've got in our pathways and going to push our pathways. It's just getting them in there, and then staying committed. Refereeing is an arduous task at the lower level. It's harder at the lower levels than it is at the top level. So it's sticking to it and staying with it and putting in the time and effort to be successful.
Just want to just a quick shout out to a young friend of mine. He's former Illawarra star and South Sydney star Craig Simon's son. So his name is Balin, and I've seen Balin ref, and I think he's only 15 or 16. 16, yeah. And he's in the junior reps, and I think he's a name for all the fans out there to keep an eye on. I think he's going to be a great young Indigenous ref coming through the ranks. So keep it up, Balin. You're doing great. So that leads me on to the Indigenous AllStars team. It's a fantastic concept. There was a couple of years back where Australia didn't play one international. The Kangaroos didn't play one international, citing player burnout. I think it was maybe the World Cup was coming up, or the World Cup had just finished. And I believe Australia's the number one driver of rugby league. Like, this is where the elite level rugby league is in the world. I think it's our responsibility to help other nations and help lift them up and provide a lot of nations with some great competition. What are your thoughts on sending an Indigenous All-Star team to tour Europe, for example, to play Wales, Scotland, Ireland, France, those type of teams, if the Kangaroos don't want to play?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool concept. You know what I mean? But a lot of things have to align for that to happen, because if the Kangaroos aren't playing, then yeah, it's going to work, and you can get the superstars, because you don't want to send a touring team without an international touring team without the superstars. So you want, if you're going to send an Indigenous star, you want Latrell Mitchell playing, you want Josh Adokar playing, guys that are in the Australian team. So it'd have to fall into place where, because you don't want those guys missing out an opportunity to play for Australia. If there is an Australian game at the same time, so they would obviously make themselves available for that, which puts a lot of pressure on those young fellas to make a decision whether they're going to play for the Kangaroos, which is every rugby league, Australian rugby league player's dream, or play for their culture, which is every young Indigenous boy's dream, to represent your culture and your family and your mob where you're from. So I wouldn't want to put any pressure on those young fellas to make that decision. But if everything fell into place and there was no international football at the end of the year for the Kangaroos, why not use that space to promote, Indigenous Australians and our culture, because you can make it a cultural tour as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Indigenous Rugby League, which is the most exciting rugby league there is. Without a doubt, you're only going to go to a knockout of a tribal league, or or go to an Indigenous community and watch them play rugby league, and there is no more exciting rugby league than Indigenous Rugby League. So
it's a lot of flair. It's fantastic.
And it is. It very much reminds me of Fiji and sevens in rugby. That's flair and throw the ball around and back your ability and use your speed and all your skills, and that's Indigenous Rugby League. And it would only make impact into people watching the game, because people want to see that.
Well, I've noticed in rugby union they use the Maori All Blacks as a touring team that played teams like Canada and Georgia and emerging countries. So I'd love to see both Indigenous AllStars and the Maori AllStars being used in rugby league if there was no matches with New Zealand and Australia at the same time, etc. So Badge, besides your role with the West Tigers, what does 2021 have in store for you?
Busy, good busy, but generally when you retire, you get to sit back and play golf and sit on the beach. But the good thing is that I feel wanted. People have wanted me to do some stuff. So I've been lucky enough for the last 4 years to be working part-time with New South Wales Rugby League in referee development. That's now turned into a full-time role. So I'm a full-time referee development officer with the New South Wales Rugby League.
Fantastic.
On top of that, I've got that part-time role with the West Tigers, and I'm also about to start some work with ACPE, so Australian College of Physical Education, as a lecturer for they've got a part of one of their courses has an officiating component, so I'm going to be doing a little bit there. And amongst all that, doing some community work and getting out there and getting into places like Tamworth and Bega and Wagga Wagga. So I'm going to be getting around and doing a little bit all around rugby league. So I always say it's not working if you're working in rugby league.
Absolutely. They say, when you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. So, you're doing a great job, Badge, and you're growing the game, and, and it's great that you're a big fan of the international game. And just a quick story. So I was working with Australian AllStars for the last 2 years, and I sent you a tweet after I'd heard that you'd retired. I said, you're always welcome to referee AllStars at Northern Beaches, at the Northern Beaches AllStars competitions where I was working at the time, and you tweeted me back saying, oh yeah, we might be down there, I might get involved. So, a lot of people have reached out to you because you've done such a great job in our game, and it's very much appreciated, and you should be very proud of what you've achieved. And thanks very much for your time today, Badge, and for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Congratulations, and thanks again, Badge.
Too easy.
Cheers.